Okay, good morning, everybody. So how many people in here actually write content? Anybody? Okay, a lot of people. All right. So I'm going to show you just 10 common content writing mistakes and how you can avoid them, how you can fix them. And so if you're a content writer, this might pertain to you. Maybe you manage people. Some of this might be reminders, but I hope there's some useful reminders here and maybe some bad habits that you can break. So when we think about web content, what we want is we want it to be clear and concise. We want it to be correct. We want it to be compelling. We want it to be consistent. And of course, we want it to be current. But sometimes what we get is not that. It's sloppy and it's sprawling. There's slip-ups. It's sleepy. It's boring. It's scattered and it's stale. So how do we fix that? The first thing we can look for is wordiness. We find a lot of cases on that, especially the faculty written pages, right? But I like to think of wordiness think of it as a game of Jenga. You want to pull out as much as you can, but you still want the structure there, so you don't want it to collapse or anything, but you want to remove just enough words so it still makes sense. So this is an example of a line that I edited in a blog post a couple weeks ago. So he made the decision that that was what he was going to do. Well, I changed that into he decided. So if you look at that again, this is 14 words, 14 words. So those are some examples of what we can find, and maybe we can really say it in fewer words. Here's a few other examples. At this point in time, she currently is, and due to the fact that, could just be now, she is, and because. Prepositional phrases and helper verbs are also some things that can slow down our content and make it less engaging, and again, put more words in there. I didn't find this anywhere. I made this up last night, so this is not part of WPCampus's marketing. The purpose of this conference is to help employees of higher education who specialize in the web do a better job of making websites that are accessible and user-friendly. Or we could liven it up a little bit and make it more active and just say WP Campus helps higher ed web professionals create user-friendly and accessible websites. And then the other thing about wordiness is what I call inging. So words that end in ing aren't always bad, but in situations like this, they were running for president. She was preparing for the storm. Again, we can chop some words out. They ran for president. She prepped for the storm. So just a little more engaging. See, red pens are good. Another thing to look out for is lame adjectives. So I like Tony the Tiger and I like Frosted Flakes. They're great, but great, back then when Tony first said it, there were 3 G's. It really meant something, or sorry, 3 R's, not 3 G's. But everything is great. Dinner was great. This conference was great. You're a great friend. Why are we using these weak words when there's this vast English language? So maybe they'll be in your first draft. But when you go through and edit your work, try to insert a better word here when you say there's something that's great. Passive voice is also something that can be a big problem. There are uses for it, but other times, it can really weigh down your text and it just sounds boring. So think about this. This is the aftermath. Some confetti laying on the street. That's an example of passive voice. Fun was had. Well, isn't it more exciting if you have the subject doing something? We had fun. See, isn't this better than people having confetti in the street? The people are doing something. I don't know where they are today, but that was 2009. Point of view is something we can also do to liven up our content. So often we say, the student this, the university that, the program this. Well, why not paint your target user into the audience by using second person, you? Or why not make the university seem a little more human and call yourself we? Just by making that one simple change, your content can really liven up and maybe even convert a little better because you're speaking directly to somebody. This problem with content, that it's actually not web content. How often does that happen? We'll just slap up a PDF here, we'll put a Word document here. I know no one in this room does this, but when you have distributed authorship across campus, you probably have a lot of great content that's hiding somewhere that is not accessible to the web and literally not accessible. So we actually need web content. So that's a big problem with content. So what? If anybody here worked in sales, you might have gotten the so what training. If you tell somebody something and then they can say, so what? It really doesn't matter. So you need to find something worth telling. So whoever's writing the content, whether it be a faculty member or the mission statement or the welcome letter from the dean, they care about it, obviously. They think it's important enough to put it on the web. But is it really? Do they care? Does your audience care? Are we there yet? I love road trips. Some people in here know that. I took a quick trip to Mount St. Helens yesterday, which took like 15 hours. But in a road trip movie, getting there is the adventure. You want to take a while to get there. You want to stop for this picture here, and that is the adventure. But when we're talking about web content, we need to focus on the destination. People scan on the web. You can't, hide the information at the end like you're crafting a narrative. You need to put the good information first so people can find it. Another problem with web content is that there's no next step. Like, look at all these arrows here. That's just throwing spaghetti on a wall and see what sticks. You need to be a little more deliberate when you're writing your content, especially for those high-level pages that you're really using for admissions and for converting. So what is the goal of the page? What should somebody do next? A lot of our web content doesn't have that. It's just, something that's just put on the web for the sake of being there. Number 9, haste. Oh, I'm sorry. That should be haste. See, when we do things really quickly, we can make silly mistakes like that. And so many of us were writing so quickly because we're dropping the new website Thursday and the content's not done. So many times we're just putting our first draft online. We don't have time to edit. We're just writing fast because we have to, the other duties as assigned. So slow down a little bit. I don't know what happened to my slide there, but it says slow down, I assure you. Another problem with web content is that it's inconsistent. Again, if you have a distributed authorship model, there's people all over the web or all over the campus creating the content. You have, different spellings over here, different capitalizations over here, different voice there, tone here, and it's not unified at all. And this is a big problem, especially on larger college websites. So what can you do to make things a little more consistent? So process is everything when it comes to that. What do you mean process? There's a writing process? A lot of people don't realize how much goes into creating content, whether it's text content, whether it's multimedia content, but you should have some kind of process in place. These are all the questions that you should ask yourself. It's kind of like a checklist. And when you look at all the things you need to know, you realize that, wow, I need to start to pay a little more attention to the content and to my content creators and giving them the time that they need, the training that they need, having a writing position. So when do you plan for the content? How do you know what you need? Who approves it? How do you feel about the Oxford comma? I'm a freelancer and I write for so many different campuses and it's hard to keep up because everybody has different rules. But do you have a style guide to keep people on track so things aren't inconsistent? And then finally, one of my favorite things is if somebody puts a piece of garbage content up there, does anybody have veto power? Can you veto content? What do you have a process in place for that, kind of like an emergency, that shouldn't be here. So think about these questions. And finally, I just want to leave you with a couple resources. There's so many of them, but one thing that I really like, it's called Grammarly. It's free, but they also have a paid version and they have a browser extension. And if somebody is kind of, the only one doing web content and they don't really have an editor or something, Grammarly is a great way to kind of just self-edit and check up some things. They'll even, you can say if it should tell a story or if it should be business, so you can set what kind of writing it should be, and it will tell you if it's not engaging, so it will get rid of some of those weak adjectives like great, and it will suggest some things. Hemingway is also a really great tool. You just plop your content in there and it will tell you what grade level it is. It will highlight all the passive voice. It will highlight the very hard to read sentences. And I've seen some pages that are highlighted in red, the whole thing. So there's some pretty clunky content out there. And then Better Than Great, it's kind of a ridiculous book, but the whole book it's like a thesaurus, but for one word. It's all different ways to say great. And I love it. It's great to have on your desk, even just for inspiration. There's another grammar book called Strunk and Bite. It's kind of a play off of Strunk and White, but kind of loosened for the new era and some rules that maybe you're allowed to break. And then finally, Grammar Girl, if you ever have a quick question, about the Oxford comma or something like that, you can just Google your question with Grammar Girl and she has the answer. So thank you.